what is your market value or rate? How do you create relationships with clients? And to be honest, I had a young child, when I made my first move a few years ago, and I had to be kind of coaxed into it. A former employer approached me, and it was something that in some ways just kind of fell into my lap, and it was fear. Fear really stopped me from taking that opportunity initially, but when I did, I realized when you jump and you get out there and take that baby step of just doing it, you can grow, and then you can go to that next stage where you can really evolve your career. So I think that's a key takeaway for me, that people get over this emotional hurdle at different points in time, and the main thing is to think about it to start out with. But what I'd love to do is to really move to our next question and have you kind of dig into that. And if we kind of bring that question up, it's a really critical one. It's kind of the heart of it, right, for a professional consultant. Am I professionally ready? Have I developed my unique skill set? And you kind of alluded to this in your prior example a little bit when you talked about Jim. But let's kind of look at what that looks like in a little bit more nuance, based on how each of our team members that touches this have really thought about the sub-questions within the area of professional readiness. And we cannot highlight enough that first one, right, about a unique marketable skill. But there's so much else. And I'd love for you to share your thoughts on this.
Well, this one is really important because when you're especially when you're coming from an employee background, you're used to doing a myriad of tasks. And now you have to ask yourself, how am I going to package that up and sell it to a client? I'll give you an example. I had a man named Chris call me. He had great success in his career as a sales rep, wanted to build next success. He figured going independent is the easy next step. It made sense. But when we talked, we really tried to break down his specific skills and specialty. It was very nebulous. And while he had great value to his employer, it was just difficult to hone in and how to sell it to a client. So he decided, you know what, now that I thought about it, I think I'm actually more comfortable being an employee. So you really need to have that specific skill set, know what it is, and own it. When clients have a problem, they should immediately think of you. Like, for example, if your client is, let's say they're trying to implement, I don't know, like PeopleSoft or something, they should think, oh, we need to get Bob on site right away. He's the expert. That's what consulting means. You're paid by getting results, not by effort. So a lot of times when I talk to people, I have to kind of explain to them, when you go into consulting, you are paid for what you produce. So it's not just being good at what you do, it's being great at what you do. So there's no coasting or anything like that, or no cushion, because at the end of the day, it's just you and your deliverable or your product and what the result is. Online presence is another big one. When I'm on the phone with a consultant, I kind of have a habit of Googling them because I'm always curious to know what they've done and who they are and a little bit of background, and I promise that your clients do this too. So it's something you want to think about. How, when you're Googled, what comes up? How professional is your site? How do you appear on LinkedIn? So that's another thing that's very important. Also, customer service. Some people don't equate this with consulting, but you have to take a step back and look at it this way, because you're migrating from a concept of pleasing an employer to the concept of pleasing and providing value to a customer. So you got to recognize that you're now in a service business, and you have to provide excellent customer service to gain that trust and build your reputation, because there's just no substitute for that. So, to summarize, you're moving from dependence to independence, and while that's a very positive thing because you have a lot more control, you also have a lot more responsibility, and there's really no one to depend on besides yourself. So,
well, while that sounds scary in one way, I think it's actually, for the kind of person that I believe does well as a consultant, that's the kind of thing that gets them going. I'm kind of hearing a theme, from you, Sarah. This idea, as you mentioned earlier, of somebody who's, willing to take on some risks. They're kind of a solopreneur. They might not want to build, Google, but they want to build a business for themselves. And they are doing it, and they're anchoring it around something that they're really great at and that they're passionate about, which I think is something that we all kind of know and understand, that when that happens, your life is aligned. And that's, I think, what leads to that statistic of that wonderful satisfaction and commitment that we saw in our national study kind of across the generations when people experience this lifestyle. I mean, it really is life-changing for somebody who has the pieces in place and just needs some baby steps to take it a little bit further. I really think those were some great concepts that you took away, and you know, just the things that we know people struggle with, and that I think we're going to start to try to help educate people on through upcoming webinars are things like, well, what are the mechanics of how you set up that right profile, right? And how do you optimize LinkedIn? And should you be on Google Plus? And should you write a blog? And, you know, all of that just seems like a lot of headache if really you just love what you do and you want to get going. And so I think there's some ways to have some shortcuts. And also I think when you love what you do and you're good at it, you want to maximize the time that you spend on it. And so that's, I think, where MBO comes in. And, you know, what makes me excited to be a part of MBO is kind of taking away all that headache and leaving enough time for people to do what they love. But, you know, there's also some stuff that we've saved for the end of this, the sort of the last question. We could say we saved the best or the worst for last. And this is kind of a tough one, but, you know, it's a really important question. Am I financially ready? Like, maybe I'm excited, maybe I'm energized, maybe I have the perfect skill set, or I think I can get there, but have I accepted or understood the risks and rewards? And I think this is one that really becomes the answer to this question, and doing this right becomes the difference between success and struggle in any change in a career, whether that's independence or otherwise. And so I think looking at some of those questions, Sarah, and getting your expertise, because you deal with this every day and you talk to people that are really deep into this dialogue, you know, I'd love for you to tell us what are those leading kind of indicators when people have done certain things. How much better are they going to be in this career, and how much more are they going to really achieve success?
Yes, that's a big part of it. The financial piece is usually, well, I won't say usually, but when I talk to people, they're excited and they are passionate, so they're ready to go, but then I have to slow them down a little bit and say, let's think about this. You know, what I referred to on our first slide, something to consider what your employee does for you, is that you get paid every 2 weeks no matter what you're doing. And people just kind of expect that, and because that's what traditional employment is. So when they go out to consult, I have to talk to them about, okay, well, have you considered things like invoicing frequency and net payment terms and the client turning around a check in the mail? For example, what's standard, what I see mostly is invoicing frequency monthly, net payment terms around 30. So already you're going to work a month and invoice, then the client has 30 days to pay you, so you're already 3 months in arrears before you've gotten any payment. So you really need to have that cash reserve. And a lot of times people are surprised that invoicing frequencies and net payment terms, the net payment terms are based on when the client receives the invoice, and they have 30 days to remit payment. So it doesn't mean they owe it to you. They just means they can mark it paid on that date. So the check is in the mail is something you'll hear often. So people are excited, and then I kind of have to ground them a little bit and bring them back down to earth, because we think about the impacts of waiting for payment. So I usually, a lot of times people ask, so how much is enough? You know, it depends on so many different things, but I typically advise consultants to have at least 3 months reserved in a liquid account. You know, money to just cover daily expenses like bills, groceries, car payments, mortgage, just to kind of get you by. Because there's also, it's not just waiting for the money, there's also increased costs of being independent. You know, right now, your employer is covering taxes for you that you have to pay when you're independent. So there's more taxes. There's increased benefit premiums. You might have to go out and get an individual policy. No one's subsidizing that for you anymore, so the cost is a lot higher. Your client might require professional insurances like errors and omission or general liability. You might want to have some accounting software like Quicken or a financial planner to help you with filing, or an accountant, a lawyer to review your contracts. Then there's marketing, branding, website. Maybe you want to bring on another subcontractor if you need help, but you don't want to turn down a great opportunity for a project. So there is quite a lot to consider there. Another thing is setup. You know, it's really important to come off professionally on the web like we discussed, but it's also important to just come off professionally in the way that you can function. And there should be no difference from the way that you function as an independent to the way that your client is functioning with other businesses. I'll give you a quick example. I had someone named Beth, and she was getting in set up in our program, and she was getting ready to go, and there was a statement of work that she needed to sign for her client, and she didn't have access to a fax machine. And a lot of people think about a fax as something pretty archaic. I know that I do. But the client needed the fax to execute the document. So she had to run out to Kinko's. There's a lot of back and forth. What number? It wasn't the best presentation of her professional skills and her ability. It wasn't a great first impression to leave the client with. So you have to think about things like that too and really be set up and ready to go. And I would say, just to summarize, you don't want to get hung up in the minutia of something you could outsource to a service provider. Your time is most valuable in building relationships and finding clients. People ask me that all the time, what can I do? What's the most important thing? And websites and stuff like that, yeah, they're expensive. I mean, they're important, rather, but the most important thing is getting in front of people and making those relationships, making those connections. So anything that's going to take you away from getting connected with clients is something that you want to outsource if you can. So, and you want to also avoid any upfront costs. Like, for example, if you go to purchase an insurance policy for professional insurances and it's $5K before you've gotten any kind of payment from the client, that's dipping into your reserves. So, services such as MBO can kind of help you offload this burden so you can focus on what you need to do to be successful. And bottom line, that's meeting with the clients and getting in front of people to get more projects.
Sarah, that's just, I think, some great advice. And, obviously income generation and covering costs and figuring out the right way to price oneself, these are really critical questions. And typically the people that are successful take the time to get educated. And, we will certainly be talking about this topic in February and really diving into some really specific ways to set up pricing so that you can cover your costs, support your lifestyle, and, of course, consider things like payment terms and other items that would help you to prepare for the best possible life as an independent. I mean, I think here, I'm certainly a huge fan of our own company's process, and, I learned about MBO going through it as a consultant before I joined the business as a formal chief marketing officer. And it was just exciting to me to know that all this stuff that, with my marketing expertise was just not interesting to me, taxation, expenses, contracts with my client, liability insurance, even acquiring medical benefits, that there was a way that I could be helped with that, and there was just such a simple, transparent fee structure that it was just going to be nothing to pay up front, no kind of weird contracts, but just if I was a fit, I would become a part of the network, and then it was 5% of my billings. And I thought that was just really wonderful, just kind of pure, simple, easy to understand.